As the sun set behind the mountains, I sat on the porch of my house, admiring the orange and pink sky. At 62 years old, I had already lived through many experiences, but what consumed me most was a secret that I kept under lock and key. It was a dark desire, a longing that awakened something in me that I thought I had buried. That desire was in my employee, the young and charming Lucas, who had been working for me for a few months. But before we dive into that story, tell us which state you're watching this video from. And if you enjoyed this touching story, don't forget to subscribe. Lucas wasn't just an employee. He became a constant presence in my life, someone who brightened my days with his smile and his unpretentious manner. From the first day he walked through the front door, something inside me awakened. He was handsome, with eyes that sparkled provocatively and an athletic body that awakened sensations I hadn't experienced in decades. Although I knew our relationship couldn't go beyond that of a simple boss and employee, the attraction between us was undeniable. What started as a simple affection turned into something more. In whispered conversations in the kitchen, in furtive glances as he walked past me, I found myself daydreaming. With each touch, he seemed to know my deepest, darkest desires, the ones I feared even confessing to myself. I wondered if he felt the same. What was this connection that united us? If not just the tension between an older woman and a younger man? Little by little, I realized that I was willing to take risks. He not only helped me with my daily tasks, but also became responsible for fulfilling my hidden desires. It was a forbidden dance, a dangerous game that made me feel alive again. As everyday life continued, we both lost ourselves in furtive moments, away from the prying eyes of society. As I reflected on all of this, I realized I was at a crossroads. What I wanted was risky, but the promise of something exciting attracted me. I was ready to embark on a journey of discovery, even if it meant giving up the security I knew. The relationship between Lucas and I began to deepen in ways I couldn't have imagined. It was a subtle game, where looks and smiles carried hidden meanings. On a hot summer day, when the windows were open to let in the gentle breeze, he was repairing a shelf in the living room. That moment was banal. But the way he moved, with confidence and grace, made my heart skip a beat. I watched him work, enchanted by the way he dedicated himself to the task, but, more importantly, by how his steady hands manipulated the wood. That's when he turned his head and our eyes met. In that instant, something changed. The tension in the air was palpable. A shy smile spread across his face, and I knew we were in dangerous territory. "Do you need help?" I asked, trying to hide my growing curiosity. He shook his head, but moved closer, and the space between us seemed to disappear. Our first touch was almost accidental. Our fingertips brushed as he passed me. Electricity coursed through my body, making my skin crawl. I never thought a simple touch could make such an impact. From that moment on, things changed. Conversations became more intimate, and the atmosphere between us was charged with hopeful expectation. We decided to find some time for ourselves, away from the inquisitive eyes of the city. I would secretly ask him out and, in return, he would grant little wishes that I never thought of sharing. A romantic breakfast by candlelight, a walk in the park where we could laugh freely and, on some occasions, a dinner at home, where conversations became increasingly emotionally charged. At night, while the world slept, Lucas became my confidant and accomplice. He listened to me carefully and didn't judge my insecurities. In our conversations, I revealed parts of myself that were hidden, revealing desires and fantasies that I never thought of confessing. And with each word exchanged, the connection between us strengthened, defying all social norms that tried to separate us. However, there was a weight on the scale. The fear of being discovered hung like a shadow. Society's rules said our relationship was wrong. But the intensity of what we shared made it harder to resist. As the attraction grew, I wondered if we could keep this secret and what would happen if the truth came out. The dilemma consumed me. I knew the line between love and betrayal was thin. Every moment with Lucas made me feel alive again. But the knowledge that I was playing with fire made me uneasy. Deep in my heart, I longed for more, but the price might be too high. With each furtive encounter, I felt more alive, more desired. Everyday life mixed with the adrenaline of our secret. The sun was setting on an especially hot afternoon, and I was sitting in the kitchen, preparing a light dinner. The aroma of garlic and olive oil filled the air as I thought about Lucas. He would arrive soon. And the anticipation made me nervous and excited at the same time. When he entered, his smile lit up the room. "What are you preparing?" he asked, with a mischievous gleam in his eyes. I laughed, trying to hide how excited I was to see him. "A surprise," I replied, as I invited him to sit at the table. Dinner unfolded amid laughter and furtive glances, as if we were the only ones in the world. As we ate, the conversation flowed easily, and I encouraged him to share his thoughts and stories. Lucas was more than an employee, he was a breath of fresh air in my monotonous life. He talked about his dreams and aspirations. And the more I learned about him, the more I was attracted. There was a depth to his being that fascinated me, and the emotional connection between us became more and more intense. After dinner, I suggested we go to the garden. The night was calm, and the stars were shining in the sky. The weather was perfect. And the flowers around us exuded an intoxicating perfume. We sat down on a wooden bench, and the conversation began to flow again, but there was a new tension in the air. Our eyes met, and the silence that followed was filled with unspoken promises. Lucas approached slowly, his eyes fixed on mine. My heart started to race as he caressed my face with his fingertips. It was a delicate moment, as if time had stopped. At that moment, I knew that what we felt for each other went beyond a simple whim. It was passion, desire, and a deep connection that could no longer be ignored. "I don't want this to end," he whispered, his voice barely audible. What I wanted was for him to continue. Then, boldly, I leaned over and kissed him. Our mouths met in a gentle touch, but the intensity of the kiss soon increased, as if everything around us had disappeared. I could no longer hide my feelings. That moment was ours. And I was ready to give myself completely. But the joy was accompanied by a pang of fear. If our secret was discovered, what would happen? What would my family and friends say? That doubt hovered like a dark cloud, but at that moment, I didn't want to think about it. The passion that burned inside me was stronger than any fear. And as much as I knew we were playing with fire, it was hard to resist the warmth Lucas brought to my life. The kiss we shared in the garden was a turning point in our relationship. I was more aware than ever that I had crossed a line that could not be undone. After that moment, the dynamic between us completely changed. Each encounter became more intense, and the line between right and wrong became increasingly blurred. The desire I felt for Lucas wasn't just physical, it was a passion that consumed me and awakened a forgotten youth in me. In the days that followed, our routine turned into a cautious dance. We tried to be discreet, but the energy between us was undeniable. When Lucas entered the room, my heart raced. And butterflies in my stomach reminded me of the secret we carried. What were once simple daily tasks now became opportunities to meet up in furtive moments. One night, after a long day at work, I decided to prepare a special dinner. We agreed that Lucas would stay later, and I wanted to enjoy that time together. When he arrived, the atmosphere was charged with expectation. I had some soft music playing in the background, creating a warm and intimate atmosphere. While I was cooking, Lucas came over and hugged me from behind. The heat of his body against mine sent waves of electricity throughout my being. "You know this is risky," he murmured, but there was no hesitation in his voice. At that moment, his warning turned into an invitation. I turned to face him, and a mischievous smile spread across my face. "What if that's what I want?" I challenged, feeling a boldness that I didn't know existed within me. Dinner was served, and as we ate, our gazes intertwined, and words became unnecessary. The tension was almost palpable, and the desire only grew. After the meal, Lucas asked me to dance, even though there was no music. He held me tight in his arms, and that moment seemed suspended in time. It was as if we were the only two beings in existence. lost in our own bubble. The boundaries I had previously been hesitant to cross were crumbling. With every touch, with every whisper, I felt more and more attracted to him. It was as if the life I knew before was fading away, giving way to something new and exciting. And as the night progressed, I realized that I was completely at Lucas's mercy, willing to give in to every wish he could fulfill. In the following days, the intensity of our relationship left me in a whirlwind of emotions. I was in love, but also terrified of the consequences it could entail. What started as an innocent game had turned into a moral dilemma. With each meeting with Lucas, I found myself more immersed in a sea of feelings that I didn't know how to navigate. It was an intense love, but also a forbidden love. One night, as I walked through the living room, I was surprised by a call from an old friend, Teresa. She had been one of the few people with whom I shared my secrets and insecurities. Hearing his familiar voice, something inside me wanted to unburden myself. "How are you, friend?" she asked. The concern in her voice was evident. "There's something about your voice that doesn't sound right to me." At that moment, doubt consumed me. I knew I should tell her about Lucas. But the idea of exposing our relationship to anyone else made me distressed. So, I talked about other aspects of my life, trying to disguise the agitation that consumed me. The conversation flowed, but the mind was elsewhere. The desire to be transparent and honest with myself weighed like an anchor, as I tried to keep my secret safe. As the conversation continued, I realized that what we were doing was more than just a romance. It was a search for freedom. Lucas made me feel alive, like I was discovering a part of myself that had been dormant for so long. But as the feelings intensified, I knew I needed to make a decision. Could we continue like this, hiding in the shadows, or was it time to face reality? After I hung up, I kept thinking about everything I had talked about with Teresa. The truth is, even though I was having fun and exploring this new side of my life, the knowledge that I was hurting someone, my husband, weighed heavy on my heart. I couldn't continue like this, without thinking about the consequences. The choice would not be easy, but it was inevitable. As I reflected on all of this, I realized that life is about choices. With each passing day, the more I asked myself, how far was I willing to go for love? Could I be happy with Lucas and at the same time ignore the pain I would leave behind? The conflict within me was growing, and I knew I needed to take action. It was time to decide whether I would continue to nurture this secret love or whether I would face the truths I feared so much. That sunny morning, I decided it was time to face the truth. I couldn't continue living between the overwhelming passion that Lucas awakened in me and the guilt that consumed me. The hours I spent reflecting on my life, on what I really wanted, brought a clarity that I couldn't ignore. I needed to talk to Lucas. We could no longer live in this shadow, and I knew that revealing our relationship could change everything. When Lucas arrived later that day, there was palpable nervousness in the air. He greeted me with a smile, but I couldn't return it. The weight of the decision I was about to make made me feel like I was carrying the world on my shoulders. He noticed my uneasiness and, before I could stop myself, I invited him to sit down. "We need to talk," I said, my voice shaking. He frowned, his gaze worried. What there was? I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I can't live like this anymore, Lucas. What we are doing is wrong. I'm torn between how I feel about you and the pain I'm causing someone else." The silence that followed seemed eternal. Lucas looked at me, his dark eyes full of understanding but also pain. I knew this moment would come. "But do you really want to give it up? What we have is real, and I don't want to lose you," he said, his voice low. I felt a surge of emotion, but the reality couldn't be ignored. "I'm not saying I don't feel anything for you. Quite the opposite. But I can't continue to hurt the person next to me. That's not fair." Tension grew between us, and I realized I was at the point of no return. What Lucas and I shared was intense and true, but the cost of it was something I wasn't willing to ignore. He stood up, looking frustrated. "What if we tried? If I made you happy, would you leave everything behind?" His words hit me like lightning. I knew he was being sincere, but I also knew this wasn't a viable solution. Love shouldn't be built on lies and betrayal. My heart broke thinking about the pain this choice would cause everyone. I need some time, I said, feeling a tear slide down my face. Lucas didn't respond, he just stood there, looking at me as if he was trying to understand the situation. There, in that moment of revelation, I realized that the choice wasn't just between two men, but about who I was and how I wanted to live my life. The truth was in front of me, and although it hurt, it was time to face it. The days that followed our conversation were a whirlwind of emotions. I had made a decision, but the reality of its consequences had yet to manifest. Lucas and I moved away, but the connection between us remained alive, like an invisible thread that united us. I couldn't stop thinking about the intensity of what we had shared and the unspoken promises that echoed in my mind. Meanwhile, everyday life continued. The husband, Roberto, noticed the change in my behavior. He was more attentive, more concerned, and that only increased my guilt. With every smile I forced for him, my heart tightened, and the shadow of what I had hidden weighed like a stone. That morning, while we were having breakfast, Roberto asked, "Are you okay? There's something on your mind." Those words cut me like a knife. How could I be honest with him without tearing everything apart? The truth was, as much as I loved Roberto, something inside me cried out for freedom. I knew he didn't deserve this. He didn't deserve the betrayal of those who should have been his support. But at the same time, the pain of knowing I was deceiving him was eating me up inside. The days passed, and Lucas' presence became more and more of a memory. He hadn't looked for me, respecting my desire for space. The distance was painful but necessary. However, one day, while organizing some things in my office, I found a photo of us. We were smiling, so happy. The sight of those memories made me want to meet him again, but soon a wave of guilt washed over me. That night, when I went to bed, the weight of the choice I made felt heavier than ever. I closed my eyes, trying to find some peace, but my mind was full of questions. What do I really want? The answer was not clear. In a moment of desperation, I picked up the phone and decided to send a message to Lucas, asking us to meet. I needed to see your face, hear your voice. And, above all, I needed to understand if what we were experiencing was really love or just a momentary desire. When the meeting was scheduled, a wave of anxiety washed over me. What would I say? We were about to open old wounds, but at the same time, the hope of finding answers made me want to move forward. As the day approached, my heart raced. The certainty that this conversation would change everything weighed on me. When the day of our meeting finally arrived, anxiety consumed me. The place chosen was a small cafe, away from prying eyes, a refuge where we could talk openly. As I got ready, I went through my closet looking for the dress that made me feel confident. I chose a dark blue dress that hugged my curves. A reminder that I could still feel attractive, even in the midst of emotional chaos. Upon arriving at the cafe, my heart skipped a beat. Lucas was already there, sitting at a table in the back, looking out the window. He seemed lost in thought, and when he saw me, his eyes lit up. I raised my hand in a hesitant gesture and approached. The heat I felt when I saw him. It left me in a nervous state, but at the same time, there was a comforting familiarity between us. "Hi," I said, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. "Sorry for calling you." "No need to apologize. I was waiting for you," he replied, and his voice was soft, like a balm for my restless soul. I sat down and, before I could think of anything to say, he held my hand across the table. The contact sent a wave of heat through my body, reminding me of what we had. "How are you?" Lucas asked, with a look that penetrated me deeply. I hesitated, but his sincerity encouraged me to be frank. "I'm lost. The truth is I can't stop thinking about us, but the guilt is killing me. I can't go on like this," I confessed, feeling tears pool in my eyes. Lucas was silent, absorbing my words. "I've been thinking about this a lot too. But I don't want you to feel trapped. If this is wrong for you, I don't want to be the reason for your unhappiness," he said, with a mix of pain and understanding in his voice. His words hit me. I knew he was sincere, but I also knew that walking away from him would be a colossal challenge. "But you make me feel alive. How can I ignore this?" I replied, the confusion in my heart intensifying. The coffee around us seemed to fade away as we were immersed in our conversation. The waiter brought our order, but I could barely eat it. With each word, with each look, the bond between us became more evident, but also more painful. It was an internal struggle between what was right and what my heart desired. We need to decide what we really want. "We can't live like this, in the shadows," Lucas said, his voice firm and clear. At that moment, I realized our conversation wasn't just about us. It was about our lives, about the future we wanted to build. Reality set in. I needed to make a choice. The intensity of what we felt couldn't be ignored, but it also couldn't be a burden we placed on each other's shoulders. Whatever we decided, it would be a new chapter, and I was about to write the next verse of my story. After that decisive meeting with Lucas, a new reality imposed itself on my life. The words we exchanged still echoed in my mind, but I didn't know how to translate this conversation into concrete actions. I returned home with a mixture of hope and fear. I was aware that my decision would have repercussions. But what did I really want? What did I want for my future? In the following days, the atmosphere at home was tense. Roberto, always attentive, began to notice my emotional state. Every time he asked me what was wrong, I just forced a smile and assured him that everything was fine. The truth is that he wasn't. Guilt and confusion consumed me. I knew I needed to be honest, but the thought of hurting Roberto was unbearable. He didn't deserve this. One morning, as we were drinking coffee, I felt an urge to unburden myself. "Roberto, have you noticed that I'm not well?" I asked, breaking the silence that surrounded us. He stopped. He looked into my eyes and replied, "Yes, I understand. You know you can tell me everything, right?" Those words were like an invitation to open my heart, but the idea of sharing the truth left me paralyzed. "It's just tired," I said, looking away. But in reality, the tiredness I felt was much deeper. It was a constant struggle between the love I had for Roberto and the burning desire that Lucas awakened in me. The decision I was about to make became increasingly inevitable. One night, as I lay down, I thought about Lucas and everything we had shared. The laughter, the secrets, the passion that seemed to ignite me inside. I needed to see Lucas again. But before that, it was time to face Roberto, to be honest, even if it meant losing everything. The next day, with a heavy heart, I invited Roberto to talk. He looked at me with a worried expression. "You're making me worry. What is happening? Really?" He seemed genuinely interested, and that added to my internal conflict. How could I hurt him? "Roberto, I don't know how to say this, but I'm not happy," I began, the words coming out more quickly than I expected. "I've been confused, and it's affecting everything." Roberto's expression changed instantly. He leaned forward, eagerly waiting for more. "What do you mean by that?" I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "There's someone who makes me feel alive, but I don't want you to suffer because of it. I feel guilty." He looked at me, shocked, but said nothing. The silence between us was deafening. The reality of what he had revealed was beginning to set in. "Did you cheat on me?" he finally asked, the pain in his voice clear. "That's not how I see it. I feel lost and I don't know what to do," I confessed, tears streaming down my face. What I feared had happened, the truth was finally out, and the consequences of my choice were about to unfold. The sight of the pain in Roberto's eyes broke my heart. It was like I had broken something precious between us, and now, there was no going back. The days following my revelation were a true labyrinth of emotions. The conversation with Roberto had left deep marks on both of them. The pain in his eyes and the guilt I carried were incessant. I knew the love we had was real. But the situation I had created was pushing us into an abyss that seemed impossible to avoid. Roberto started to behave differently, more distant, and I understood him. He was processing the betrayal I had revealed, even though I insisted it was not an act of disloyalty, but of a desperate search for happiness amid a sea of confusion. However, the words spoken could not be unsaid. And the truth that now hung between us was a weight we couldn't ignore. One night, as I looked out the window, I saw the full moon lighting up the sky. I thought about Lucas and how alive he had made me feel. But the memory of Roberto brought me a wave of nostalgia. I remembered the good times, the laughs shared, and the love we built over the years. At that moment, I realized that I needed to make a decision not just for myself, but for Roberto. I decided I couldn't continue with Lucas, at least not the way he was. Sending him a message would be a difficult but necessary step. "Lucas, we need to talk," I wrote, hesitantly. When he responded, with a simple, "When and where?" my heart skipped a beat. I knew this meeting would be crucial. When we met, it was in a park, a place that had once brought us so much joy. He greeted me with a smile, but soon an expression of concern settled on his face. "What is happening? I feel like I'm losing Roberto." "The truth is, I care about him. You made me feel things I haven't felt in years, but now I realize I need to choose. I can't live in this uncertainty," I declared, every word becoming a burden on my heart. Lucas looked at me, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I don't want to be the reason for your unhappiness, but I also can't walk away without telling you how much you mean to me." The intensity of his words was palpable, but the decision had already been made. "I need to get away from you. Please understand. It's not for you, it's for me, for us, for Roberto. I need to try to recover what we lost." Tears accumulated in Lucas's eyes. He nodded, although his pain was clear. "I respect your decision, but that doesn't make it any easier. You will always be special to me." At that moment, I realized that the memories we had were treasures that I would always keep, but I needed to look to the future, even if it meant leaving behind what could have been. Over time, I sought reconciliation with Roberto. We needed to rebuild what we had broken, and I was willing to fight for it. The path would be difficult, but at the same time, I felt relief knowing that I was making the right choice for me. Life wasn't the same anymore, but that didn't mean it couldn't be beautiful again. Acceptance of the past and the search for a future that respected love and lessons learned were now my priority. The journey I had been on had taught me a lot about love, loyalty, and what really matters. Deep in my heart, I knew that the choices I made might be painful, but they were also necessary. And now, it was time to live this new phase of life, with courage and hope, in search of the happiness that we all deserve. And you? What would you do in a situation like this? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories. Life is full of complex choices and loves, and I would love to hear your